Look at where his racket head goes when he's storing and loading energy in his body. Now, I want you to pay attention to a few things here. Notice that they both have essentially a similar amount of separation in their shoulders and their hips. So look at Rublev's shoulders and look at his hips. Both of their shoulders are turned more than their hips. But what I want you to see on the left with the recreational player is, look at where his racket head is. This is a pretty common inefficiency we see with players who want to hit the ball hard. They think that just by taking the racket back further and further around, they're going to really wind up and get a pretty big hit. And that can be the case sometimes, but just the way that player on the left is preparing predicates a swing that goes a little bit too much around like a merry-go-round versus having a swing that goes a little bit more down and out towards the target. Now, we'll touch on that a little bit more, but what I want to show you is the distance the racket has to travel into contact. If we watch the player on the left here, you'll notice that his racket has to travel further into the contact. Now, if we look at Rublev here, his racket doesn't have to travel as far into the contact. Why is that something that you need to be aware of? Because it's a timing issue. It's not just that the recreational player takes the racket back 1.5 feet extra on the left side here. It's that he has to now take it back 1.5 feet extra into the contact. So basically his swing has 3 feet extra to it compared to Rublev's, where he's keeping the racket on the hitting side of the body. Now, it's all about calculations. If you're preparing with the racket head here, your brain's just going to have to work a little bit harder to get the racket face into the right position at contact. I'll give you the caveat. If you're 6 years old and you can hit 2,000 forehands a day, then yeah, you can reach a high level playing that way. But try to make it easier for yourself. Try to use strokes that are efficient, that require less timing and calculations for you as a tennis player. That's one of the main reasons why we encourage players to keep the racket on that hitting side. Moving on to the ATP versus WTA forehand discussion. I know a few years ago on Tennis YouTube, there were quite a few videos that covered these topics. And I think the issue is a little bit more fundamental than that. It has to do with the dimensions of the court, and it has to do with how long the ball is actually in contact with the strings. This information is from Vic Braden, and I believe he was the first person to really measure the court dimensions in this way. The tennis court is extremely narrow. From the center of the court, you have about 19.6 degrees to play around with. What do I mean by that? If you tilt your racket face to the left from the center hash mark, it'll hit the intersection of the left single sideline and the baseline. If you tilt it 19.6 degrees to the right, it'll hit the right intersection of the single sideline and the baseline. Now, that's not a lot of space at all. Now factor in that the ball is only in contact with the strings for roughly 4 to 6 milliseconds. We say 5 milliseconds just to make it a little bit easier. And hopefully you can start to see by yourself why you want to have a stroke that doesn't swing around your body the way this recreational player is here. And you want to have a stroke that stays roughly on the hitting side. It's because if you swing the way the recreational player on the left is, your strings tend to fold across too quickly. They don't stay within the degree range of the tennis court for long enough. So not only do you struggle with having a more difficult timing to make, but your strings also don't face the target for long enough. You want your strings to face the target for a long period of time, on all strokes except serves and overheads. You want them to have long hitting zones. That's why we really encourage you to not take your racket all the way behind your body, because A, it's going to be a timing issue, and B, it's so difficult to make the correction with the swing shape. Now, don't get me wrong, there is an inside-out component to really efficient strokes, but rarely will you see a player who takes his or her racket all the way back here who can hit the forehand really well. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, and there's no such things as a perfect stroke. You can program the brain to do all sorts of crazy things if you just have enough time and time to do lots and lots of repetitions. But for those mere mortals out there, for those recreational players who are really struggling with timing, I really recommend keeping your racket head on the hitting side, letting it fall into the slots, and that'll also let you create a swing shape that matches the shape of the court. Remember, you only have 19.6 degrees to play around with, and then the contact with the racket is only 5 milliseconds, regardless of if you're hitting really efficiently or inefficiently. So you need to think about the shape of the court when you're hitting the forehand, and not just that I want to blast this ball really hard, so I'm going to take my racket all the way back here. Hey, sorry for the interruption. If you're struggling with your forehand, check out my free video consult where you can bring footage of your forehand and I will give you feedback on it. It's just a way for me to preview what a virtual private lesson would look like. All the information is in the description below. All right, back to the video. If you have bought into the information, then I just want to show you 2 quick drills that you can do to clean or correct your forehand if the backswing is a little bit too large. So if we watch here on the left, you can set up right against a net, make a unit turn so that both your arms are over the net, step forward, let the racket head fall, and this is where you have to do your best to make sure that racket head does not touch the net. So you want to do your best to keep that racket head on the right side of the body, let it relax, and then you still have to swing away from the body. So see how this player is moving the racket head straight out? You really have to swing from close to away. But just as an example drill for how you can get the feeling of not bringing that racket all the way back, that's one of the drills. Now let me show you another one, and I'll show you really the effect it had straight away. Okay, the next drill we're looking at is where you need to place the non-hitting hand on the face of the racket. If we watch here, the player is turning, he's making a unit turn, and look at where his hand is positioned. It's right on the face of the racket. And the question is why? Well, lots of players aren't really aware of where their racket is going. I mean, your eyes are looking forward, you're focused in on the ball, but the racket's behind you. So you might not be aware of where the racket head really is traveling. So this is just a simple way of making players aware where the racket head is. Now, look at his preparation here, and already just by using this drill, we can see that his racket head isn't going as far back as it was here. It's a really simple, really effective way to make players aware of where their racket head travels. So if we look on the right here, look how far away his hand goes compared to where it is here. Okay, you'll see lots of players who get into a similar position like this. For example, Tsitsipas does get the racket head close to this position on the forehand. It's okay once it drops roughly below the hand, once it gets into the slot, if it gets into that position. But if it's above the hand, you don't necessarily want it going all the way back here. where this recreational player has set it up. So there you go, 2 easy drills to help you correct what's a pretty common inefficiency at the club and recreational level. And now I just want to show you a few months down the line of where the recreational player was when he made the changes to his forehand. I understand that they're not the same feeds, I'm definitely aware of that, but look at his racket. The simplest way is by drawing a line through your body. If we really look at where the racket is versus where it is on the right side, you can see it's staying on the hitting side. Now, I actually think that this player has overcorrected a little bit, where he's been so focused on making his forehand efficient and reducing all the extra movements that he has gone a little bit too far. And what I mean by that, you still want to get a little bit of separation in between the hips and the shoulders here. So you can see that here he has way better separation. His shoulders are turned a little bit more than his hips. And on the right side here, he hasn't got the same kind of shoulder separation. So that's definitely something he can add in while also keeping the racket on the hitting side. So there you go, everyone. Hope that helped to explain why you want to keep that racket on the hitting side. It's more about the shape of the court and what happens during contact. You don't want those strings flying across the court because you don't know where you could actually contact the ball. You want to keep those strings facing the target for a long period of time. Hope you all enjoyed the video and hope to see you again soon. Please like and subscribe if you made it all the way here. It goes a long way towards helping the channel grow. And check out my virtual private lessons. There is a free 30-minute consult where you can show me video of the stroke that you're struggling with, and I'll give you feedback on it. And then it's just a way for you to trial the virtual private lessons before you hopefully decide to buy them. Thanks again. See you all soon.